Item 6B.
Receive final report presentation and recommendations from the City of Alameda's America's Cup Ad Hoc Committee.
All right, thank you. I'm Eric Fonstein, Development Manager with the City's Community Development Department. The City Council formally created the America's Cup Ad Hoc Committee in June of 2011. And for over 2 years, the Ad Hoc Committee has worked very hard identifying and realizing opportunities for the city to benefit from the 34th racing of the America's Cup. With the Oracle Team USA winning the International Regatta last September, Christopher Seiwald, Chair of the Ad Hoc Committee, is here to present the committee's final report on its successes and recommendations for moving forward. So with that, Christopher.
Thank you, Eric. Mayor, Council, and staff. Yes, I am the chair of the Ad Hoc Committee on America's Cup. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what the America's Cup is about, what our committee was about, what impact we had, and then some recommendations for you if you didn't already read about it in the Alameda Journal. If you're like many Alamedans, you might, who don't understand that because we're an island, we're surrounded by water, you might not know that the America's Cup is a sailing race. It's the world's oldest sailing race. It was first. It's named after the boat, the America, which won the first race in 1851. And the way it works is that the winner, who becomes the defender, gets to pick the time, place, and manner of the next race. The defender this year was the United States, represented by Team Oracle, and they chose to host it in San Francisco Bay with these catamarans. And this was quite different than any race, any America's Cup race before. These catamarans were much different beasts than what the sailors had been sailing in the previous ones. Instead of a wing, they had instead of a sail, they had a wing. It was all carbon fiber construction. These things, I think, cost somewhere near $1 million a piece. And for the first time ever, the race was not held on the open ocean. It was held in a bay where people could see it, and it provided quite a different experience for the viewers of the race. There were a lot of skeptics and doubters, but I can safely say that after the spectacle, whatever it was this summer, that it'll be hard to imagine the race going back to any slower boats or less exciting boats in the future. Now, one of the things about the byproduct of these bigger, fancier, expensive boats is it created quite a barrier to entry for the racing teams. It requires a large crew to sail the boat. It then requires a tremendous amount of staff on the ground to support it. And so eventually, many teams dropped out. They originally anticipated, I think, somewhere between 8 and 12 potential challengers against the defender. And in the end, there were only 3 that were left aside from the United States. That was Italy, New Zealand, and Sweden. Because of this, they had to downsize a lot of their expectations about who was going to show up and what the participation in viewing was going to be. And so the numbers dropped quite a bit, something like 27%. And I'm not sure what the actual final estimates were for actual attendance on it, but nonetheless, it was down from their original estimate. Still, they say that it's one of the biggest sporting events in the world, behind the World Cup and I think the Super Bowl, in terms of the people who wind up watching the event. And if you were around for the final race, you'll know that there was a lot of people who were tuned into it that might not otherwise have known anything about it. The Alameda's Ad Hoc Committee was formed in 2011 by the City Council. We were like all good committees. We had a mission statement. That was our first order of action, was to create the mission statement. Unlike many committees, we actually turned back to our mission statement many times because it turned out to be exactly what we wanted to do. And what our mission statement more or less said was that we were trying to capture the heightened tourism and interest that surrounded America's Cup to, first of all, increase our own appeal Alameda's appeal as a tourist destination, and then to strengthen Alameda's reputation as a vibrant maritime community. We really wanted to sort of fill our sails with the wind of America's Cup. We were a 12-member committee, which unfortunately made it very awkward, people coming and going. Practically the only thing we ever had quorums for was to vote on our previous minutes, but that was fine. That was not really our goal, was to pass too many motions. We met every month, but a lot of the support that we got from people outside the committee. Sometimes they wanted to join the committee, but just as often they were happy to show up and participate. So we were trying to figure out how to involve ourselves in the America's Cup. We actually had a grid of something like 50 different ideas, from a helipad at Alameda Point to circus and carnivals and all sorts of things to try to bring interest across the bay to Alameda. It turns out there were a lot of other cities trying to do the same thing: Berkeley, Emeryville, Richmond. A lot of the cities around the bay were trying to cash in on the America's Cup. And I have to say that we did a very respectable job compared to the other cities. So when I say that I would talk about our successes, I should mention that not all these things were simply the direct effect of the committee. We were 12 people. We were not out there, paving Alameda Point or doing any of the heavy lifting. We acted more as catalysts, and some of these things happened certainly without our involvement. But one of the key pieces we did was to encourage the mayor to write to the teams, offering them Alameda as a potential location for hosting, for setting up their shops, which the mayor graciously did. And as a result, we wound up having a couple of the teams come to Alameda and set up their operations there. So our first one was Artemis racing team, the Swedish team. They signed a 19-month lease, which I think they're still using. They still have their stuff out there, and they were attracted by the facilities at Seaplane Lagoon. A large industrial space right next to the water. Seaplane Lagoon, a protected body of water with a nice little beach and very few underwater obstacles. But Artemis came to town. There were about 70 crew members or 70 staff, and then all their families. And they really became an integrated part of Alameda for a while. People really liked seeing them around the town. Their children were in our schools. They used all our local businesses. And then the team, used local hotels, the Palladium for their gym, catering, just a whole host of things: yoga classes, hotel accommodations, childcare, preschool, marine services, custodial services, building supplies, machinery stops, a lot of marine-related activities, rented housing and an apartment in the area, and then, of course, there was a direct benefit to the city of the lease, which is almost $400,000. Again, some of this was directly due to us. There were other things where just the community sort of chipped in. I know that the Alameda Soccer Club volunteered the use of Hornet Field so that they could do their morning Frisbee games. This was after the death of one of the Artemis members, and they knew they could use a little bit of community support. So it was really an integrated event. I know that a lot of people talked about seeing the Artemis people around town. It was almost like celebrity sightings if they were wearing those jackets, because I don't think they gave away those jackets. We had another success on the same category, which was Luna Rossa, the Italian team. They signed a 7-month lease for $137,000. The New Zealand team also took a look, and we were, I think, talking to the French team, but they eventually dropped out. But in the end, we wound up with 2 of the 4 racers in the final competition being hosted in Alameda, which is not a bad thing. Indirectly, there were a lot of other successes that came, windfalls that sort of came to Alameda because of America's Cup. Again, we weren't necessarily, turning all the cranks, but a lot of business came here. Bay Ship and Yacht, of course, did a tremendous amount of work for them. Power Engineering, Senson's Boat Works, Bustad Construction did much of the construction for the America's Cup facility over in San Francisco. Charter boats, chandleries, restaurants, bars, everybody sort of gained from the increased activity happening in Alameda. And I should say there was only gains. Really, there's no losses in this whole affair. Alameda just came out strikingly ahead. Another thing we wanted to do was raise the awareness of Alameda as a sailing community. So we had some successes here. We had both Artemis and Luna Rossa. And so Alameda, because they were hosted in Alameda, Alameda got mentioned many times in national and international papers. As a maritime community, our name appeared in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, USA Today, Reuters, Associated Press. We had there's a local online newspaper, the Alamedan, and they had a weekly blog entry called Maritime Report, which was written by one of our committee members, Dave Block. We got a lot of positive response from the racing team members, and so just their speaking positive of Alameda was very helpful. And then in general, a lot of sailing-related activities just picked up in Alameda. We talk about the businesses, the marine businesses, just noting that more was going on. We also hosted possibly the biggest public event outside of the biggest public event hosted by one of the racing teams outside of the concert series that they had in San Francisco. It was possibly the biggest event surrounding the America's Cup in the Bay Area. So this all happened because of our close relationship with Artemis. They were amenable to coming and giving a presentation at the Alameda Theater. We had something like 700 people there, including almost all the members of the committee. And it was very nice of them to be able to come and speak about what went into America's Cup and what went into racing, because for them, they're very busy during that time. To take the time out to come and talk was very gracious. So they helped educate the community about their sport. A lot of members of the team were actually in the lobby to talk to people before the event. They donated some of their gear for a raffle. They gave away posters. And then a real treat was Paul Kayard, the CEO for Artemis, did much of the talking. And so, making themselves available before a major competition was quite important. The event was sponsored by a number of Alameda businesses, which meant it was free for the public to come. Bay Ship and Yacht, Alameda Theater, of course, hosting it. USS Hornet, the Perforce Foundation, and the Alameda Waterfront website all contributed to that. It was run by a bunch of subcommittee members, mostly people who weren't actually on our committee, but who volunteered to help run it. And the success of the event at the Alameda Theater led to their decision to then show 17 races on their screens as a simulcast for the race, and they showed the final one on the big screen, and over 300 people were there to watch that. So that was quite a success in that regard. Our committee also organized a number of other sort of outreaches, community events, and made presentations to local business organizations to let them know what was going on with America's Cup. Nice not having that little beeper go off. The city staff helped to produce a bit of promotional material to try to promote Alameda to the world as a destination, again, surrounding America's Cup. You had to be careful about using the name America's Cup. I think they're less careful about it now, but nonetheless, we did get a bit of lift from that. Another idea we had early on, one of the things on our list of things was to try to capture interest via the web, and one of our committee members, Jack Boger, created AlamedaWaterfront.com from another website he had to more or less represent this whole event and Alameda's part in it on the web. It was a big success. A lot of visits, a lot of people watching the news that he had posted and what he had reposted. People quoting that. So it was a very successful site. We'd actually like to see that continue on as a premier website representing Alameda as a waterfront community. Another piece we had was a notion of creating a community sailing center, and we did, in fact, launch that this summer. Another committee member pretty much took that on and ran with it. They ran a junior sailing camp this summer. 75 kids went through the program. It was for 8 to 13-year-olds, and it ran for 8 weeks. Each day there were 5 days a week from 9 to 4, and 23. So we also had some scholarship money. 23 scholarships were given to children from Girls Inc. and from the Boys and Girls Club, so they could attend. And we also had 11 need-based scholarships for families that could otherwise not attend. And that's actually a picture of the sailing in action. My daughter tried it. She actually went to a week of it. Apparently, the first thing they do is they dump you in the water,
Yes.
so that you can get used to that side of the equation. Finally, we have some recommendations about what we think should happen with the ad hoc committee and what the city should do. First of all, we'd like to continue on our ad hoc committee until the decision is made sometime next year about where America's Cup is going to be hosted. We're planning on meeting quarterly, assuming we're not disbanded. As I say, sometime mid-next year, the decision should come down as to where it's going to be hosted. If it's hosted in the San Francisco Bay Area again, we think we should continue our activities and, in fact, ramp them up quite a bit. If San Francisco is selected, yes, we'd like to ramp up the committee. There's likely to be a whole lot more interest the second time around because it was such a success. Especially Alameda is now going to be seen as a big potential destination. Our committee was kind of unwieldy because of its size, so we'll probably try to downsize that, though there are some people who attended just about all the meetings, even though they weren't on the committee, and probably deserve to be there, because if they show up, they could be part of our quorum, and they could help us pass our minutes. We think that it's worthwhile for the city to send letters to Oracle and the other teams, congratulating them on their participation, and once again encouraging them to think about Alameda as a potential destination or it's a potential home should America's Cup again relocate here. We think we have a great facility for that, and in particular, we think that you should keep in mind, and I know there's a lot going on at the Seaplane Lagoon, but especially in its interim use that's going to be happening over the next few years, is preserve the area around Seaplane Lagoon for maritime use, and in particular, make sure that it's available should these teams return, that they would have some space nearby that they could possibly house their operation. America's Cup is not the only sailing event in the world. There are other ones. Our committee, when they close their eyes and look off into the stars, they envision the Seaplane Lagoon being a very nice destination for all sorts of maritime activities. They envision sailboats sailing across all the time, from the little beach to the restaurants, to the restaurants, and it could be a real prime hub for sailing events around the world. And finally, just in general, remember that Alameda is an island. It is surrounded by water, and even more importantly, if you go around, it's surrounded by marinas. It's surrounded by boats. There's a tremendous amount of maritime activity, and we should continue to support that as much as we can to preserve Alameda as a maritime destination. I'd like to acknowledge the members of the committee, at least those who made, including Mary, who was the one who showed up, who wasn't on the committee. So if you all want to stand, our committee here. And he didn't stand up, but I also have to thank Eric Fonstein tremendously for all the help he's put into it. Great sense of humor, which is important with our committee, and the tireless effort in putting keeping us on track and making sense out of a bunch of sailor talk. So thank you. And I'm here to defer any questions you have to the people who know more about this. But
a really quick minor question. I think there was a slide a few back, and there were a series of the maritime flags, the spelled letters. Was that spelling out the name Alameda?
How far back was
there.
that?
Okay. Before the website.
Before the website.
Wait, you just passed it. Go at the bottom there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Alameda. Whose handiwork was that? Oh, okay.
Oh, Lori Taylor. Okay, very clever. And that big group in the last slide, is that the Artemis team and all their support crew and everything? Yes, they're nodding yes. Okay. Really nice presentation. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say a big thank you to the committee, and I think Mr. Seiwald is being very modest regarding what the committee has done. I think when we all sort of set off to do this, some of us didn't know what to expect. And I have to say that you folks have exceeded our wildest expectations. It is a major coup to have 2 of the 4 participants being housed here in Alameda. Not only from the monetary aspect, but just having their enthusiasm and energy as they went about their business on the island was truly phenomenal. I had an opportunity to meet some of the families and the kids, and just talking to them was really uplifting. They were excited to be here. They were happy to be here. They had wonderful things to say about our community. And that is probably just the most visible thing that you guys were able to accomplish. But I had the distinct pleasure of touring the Seaplane Lagoon yesterday with Cami Richards and Christopher Seiwald here. And it's important to have people who have vision, because without vision you can't accomplish anything. And I just want to say a profound thank you for that trip, and a profound thank you to the members of the committee. And I absolutely am behind keeping you guys together. And I'm hoping that San Francisco is once again selected and that we can ramp up. And I will do everything I can to help support you guys, because I think it was just phenomenal. And on a personal note, we can talk about that beach in the Seaplane Lagoon.
That beach, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.